So I just watched the brand new Taika Waititi Marvel Studios film, Thor: Love and Thunder. Now you're probably wondering why I sound not excited to do this. That's because I didn't want to do this review, but it fell below expectations. This was the movie, and again, there are videos of me. Literally, if you go watch my trailer reactions, I kept saying this is my most anticipated, most exciting MCU movie for all this year. This includes Doctor Strange, Multiverse of Madness, Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, Moon Knight, Miss Marvel, whatever. It was my most anticipated MCU movie of the year, and it's safe to say that it did not live up at all to the movie. Uh, there's a lot of negative things I gotta say, but I do want to clear one thing up. It's not a movie I hate. I still liked it. It's entertaining. It's enjoyable, but it's also to a limit. It's barely saved. But I do want to get into the positives first and then get to the negatives. And again, there will be no spoilers. Don't worry, I will not be spoiling any key details in this movie whatsoever. But I do want to make sure and say that Chris Hemsworth is great in this movie. Chris Hemsworth was fantastic. His acting is great. Now, I think the way they wrote the character of Thor was not very good. It's not. I won't deny that. The character of Thor was not written all that well in this movie. There's good points in it, but I ultimately think this movie suffers from too much Taika Waititi. But let me get into that in a bit. But the good stuff is Chris Hemsworth's great. Natalie Portman's great with what she does, especially in the third act. Natalie Portman's acting is great within the movie. And the best standout in this movie is Christian Bale. Now, there's actually some negatives to Gore, but not because of the character of Gore. But ultimately, Gore is the standout. Gore the God Butcher is the standout. Every time he's in a scene, he's creepy. In fact, the movie begins with the origin of Gore's story. I won't say what it is, but a lot of you comic fans already know what it is. But simply, I love how it starts off with Gore's motivation. Why does he do the things he does and all that? I think this movie, Korg was hilarious in this movie. The comedy in this movie, now I'll get to that later, but there's a couple of jokes that land here. No, I won't deny it. There's jokes in this movie that I enjoy. There's like these two goats that you've seen in the trailers. You see these goats. They're hilarious the first minute they're in the movie. For the rest of it, they're not. In fact, they start getting annoying. But in the beginning, they're hilarious. They're very funny. There's like this funny joke at the beginning with them. The Guardians of the Galaxy are barely in this movie. If you came here expecting a movie of Thor teaming up with the Guardians of the Galaxy, do not be expecting that, because the Guardians only show up at the beginning and then they leave. It's kind of like they literally were trying to remind you, hey, this happened in Endgame, and here we are. That's literally what they serve for. In fact, I'll even say the Guardians didn't even feel like the Guardians in this movie. It kind of just felt like Taika didn't know what to do with them, so he just quickly wrote them in, and that's it. So if you want to know how much Guardians there is in this movie, you basically watched every scene with them in the trailers. They're every single second, every single frame is literally put in the trailers. But the big standout of this movie is, of course, Gore the God Butcher. His motivations are great. He's scary. He's intimidating. I love it. He's very terrifying. And if you're a big comic fan, if you're a big Gore fan like I was or I am, he does fit that. Maybe he doesn't look like Gore, of course. Regardless, that's not important. At the end of the day, he felt like what Gore would feel like. Gore was perfect. There's some beautiful shots in this movie. There's some very beautiful shots in this movie. I won't deny it. But the best part, besides Gore, the best part of this movie is Thor and Jane's relationship. Now, this movie is played out as a rom-com. This movie does get heavy into the comedy. Now, the comedy only works for me about 40% of the time, which means for the rest of the 60%, I did not like the jokes. However, I will say this though, and I want to make this clear. I love Thor Ragnarok. Thor Ragnarok to me is a top 5 best MCU movie. It was a movie that revitalized the character of Thor, but I will say this right now, the first Kenneth Branagh Thor movie, which I still think is the second most underrated MCU movie overall, I genuinely believe that movie is far better than this movie. The first Thor movie, I'm not a fan of Thor the Dark World. I think that's the weakest MCU movie, but that first Thor movie was magnificent. It's wonderful. It's in my probably top 15 MCU movies. I don't know if it's top 10, but it's top 15. Thor Love and Thunder is the third best Thor movie out of 4 movies. And Dark World is not a high bar to me. This movie has a lot of problems, but again, I want to get into some good. The visuals are good. Some of the jokes are good. When the Guardians show up, they're pretty entertaining for the couple of minutes they're in there. Thor and Jane's relationship is pretty adorable, especially in the third act. In the third act, they massively improve. There's like 4 beautiful scenes in this movie that I'm not going to say, but they're some of the best scenes I've seen in the entire MCU. But now that we got all the positive out the way, and again, I'll say this right now, I still think this is a entertaining movie, but that's all I can say. This movie disappointed me on many fronts. Number one, I'll say this, there's not enough gore. At the beginning, it makes it look like you're going to get a lot of gore. You do get Gore's quick origin, and then throughout the movie you do see him being scary. This might come off as a spoiler, but it is not a spoiler, and I feel like this actually might save some people some time. And I'm gonna say this isn't a spoiler because it doesn't affect the plot at all, but here it is. In the movie, they explain that Gore's out there killing gods. I watched this movie, and before doing this review, when I was writing my notes, I came to find out that Gore never killed a god on screen. I'm not joking. They just tell you off screen Gore has been killing multiple gods. I'm not going to say what his end game is, but his name was Gore the God Butcher, and we didn't see God butchering. There wasn't enough gore. I felt like this movie needed a lot more gore. He was the best part. Christian Bale's acting is phenomenal in this movie. I'll even say that Gore in this movie is better than Batman is in The Dark Knight Rises. Not better than Batman is in The Dark Knight and Batman Begins, but he is better than the Batman version we got in Dark Knight Rises. Even though I think Christian Bale was great in that movie, I'll just say that. There wasn't enough gore. The comedy in this movie, I brought up the goats. The goats are funny for the first joke they're in, which is like a minute long. But then for the rest of the jokes, they start getting annoying. It just felt like the 2014 Vine where the goats is screaming. You guys know that meme. You can literally search it up. But they just constantly kept repeating that joke over and over again. It got boring. Tessa Thompson. Tessa Thompson is a fantabulous, very talented actress, and she has such a high potential for the future. And she was phenomenal in Thor Ragnarok. But Tessa Thompson didn't do shit in this movie. In fact, there's at least half of her scenes in this movie, you just see her making a boring face. And it felt like Tessa was just forced to do this movie. It didn't feel like Tessa wanted to be here. And so that was another vital flaw in this movie. Valkyrie doesn't do much. And again, a lot of the jokes aren't good. And I'll bring up Zeus. So Russell Crowe is one of my favorite actors of all time. Of course, he's Jor-El in Man of Steel, but his standout role is, of course, in Gladiator. That's actually one of my favorite movies of all time. Russell Crowe is one of my favorite actors of all time. I would definitely say he's a top 10. So I was excited to see Zeus in the trailers. He looked good. And I like the accent because typically in these Greek gods, you'll often hear them with British accents and all that. Zeus in this movie is used for the scene you see in the trailer. That entire scene is honestly one of the worst scenes in the entire MCU. It was boring. The comedy was horrible. It felt stretched out, and that nude scene in the trailer, which you've seen in the trailer, you do get to see Chris Hemsworth's butt, so I guess some of you are going to enjoy that. The entire joke, the build-up to that joke, and then the ending of that whole scene in Olympia, I think that's what it's called, was honestly the worst scene in this movie. I did not like it. It was so unfunny. And I'll say the joke. Because this isn't a spoiler. This isn't part of the plot. But the whole joke in this part is Zeus is this almost kind of like fat retired god, or not retired, but he's not trying to save people. In fact, he's too scared to confront Gore because he has the nectar, the sword. I don't know why I'm saying, but he has, of course, he fears Gore because Gore can kill him. And the whole point leading up to this is that all Zeus does is he schedules orgies with other gods. And I know some of y'all that haven't seen the movie are saying Zeus is planning orgies with other gods. Yeah, that's the whole joke. They kept repeating that joke over and over throughout the scene. Like at one point, they even says, "Thor, you're not invited to the orgy." I was like, okay, that really. I'm somebody who likes nasty humor. A lot of you guys know I love immature humor. I love that joke in Peacemaker where Peacemaker says Superman has a poop fetish. I like these kinds of jokes. That entire scene was so bad. And Russell Crowe did well with what he did. I like that he had a Greek accent. You know, usually Greek gods in movies will have a British accent. in this movie, the joke was so lame. I don't know how Russell Crowe read the script and said, I'm going to do this. Now, my assumption is because he needed a paycheck. Because, of course, if you're a big actor like that, who's going to deny a Marvel movie that's probably offering him millions? But, anyways, back to what I was saying. The whole point of Zeus there was an orgy. It was literally just orgy jokes repeated over and over. And I was kind of like, really? This is a movie about a guy who's literally murdering and slaughtering gods. And the movie has, and I said this early in this, there are 4 scenes in the movie that are some of the best scenes I've seen in all the MCU. But those 4 scenes, you want to know why they work. And you're going to count them when you watch the movie. Those 4 scenes work because for at least those with that time period, there's not a lot of humor. They focus on the scene. They focus on the characters. They focus on the romance. And Taika Waititi is fantastic at that. If you watch Jojo Rabbit, if you watch Thor Ragnarok, he knows how to focus on serious moments when there's already too much comedy. James Gunn, I think, does that perfectly with the Suicide Squad. There are moments where you just need to stop and tell the audience, hey, this is a deep, dark moment. Especially in the Suicide Squad, that scene where a rat catcher's kind of telling everyone her origin. You stop. There's no jokes for a couple of seconds. You're literally just, as the audience, you're just told to sit there and indulge in her story. Thor Ragnarok has like 2 or 3, 4 scenes in this, especially in the third act. The third act has like 2 scenes that I love. But then everything else, the rest of the movie, they never take anything serious. The whole joke is, oh, Mjolnir is Thor's ex, and Thor's ex is also Jane Foster, and they love each other. In the entire movie, it's just this running gag of, oh, Stormbreaker is the new one, and Mjolnir is the ex. Haha, there's the love triangle. And every second in this movie is just a constant, nonstop joke. Even in the third act, there's this very serious moment that's happening, and Thor still is making a joke. It felt, this is what a lot of people look. I love the MCU. I've been loving MCU Phase 4, Shang-Chi, Eternal, Spider-Man No Way Home. There's a lot of stuff I've loved so far of the MCU in Phase 4. But I'll say this right now, Thor Love and Thunder is the definition of why some people don't like the nonstop jokes in the MCU. I'm not joking when I say that. This movie suffers from the Marvel formula problem. The joke, because for some reason, it's kind of like they forgot that the audience wants to find an emotional story. And yes, it does deliver on that with 4 scenes, but the rest of the movie is just joke, pause, joke, another joke. It's just repeating the same shit over and over and over. And my crowd was pretty loud. A lot of people were laughing. And the most awkward thing I can feel in the movie is not feeling the same emotional reaction that the rest of the audience, because the audience was laughing a lot. But for like 60% of that time period, I was not laughing with them, and I felt awkward. I felt like I was being way too serious. This movie has such a serious concept, but it's kind of like it's like wearing this nice shirt. Let's say you're wearing this nice suit and tie, for Minions Rise of Gru premiere. You're wearing your nice suit and tie, but then somebody puts on a 2XL shirt with like stains on it, and then another 2XL shirt with more stains on it, more stains. And now that nice suit and tie you had is now being covered up by these dirty, oversized shirts that make you look dirty. That's kind of what Thor Love and Thunder was. It had this good premise, this good story, that was then put dirty shirt, another dirty shirt. There's layers to it. We should have been down here seeing that layer that we wanted from the beginning, but instead it layered it with multiple stuff, because it kind of felt like Taika Waititi was like, oh, everyone loved the humor of Ragnarok. Let's do that again, but intensify it. And some of the reviewers were saying, oh, if you love Ragnarok, you're going to like this movie. If you didn't like Ragnarok, you're not going to like this movie. I agree with the second part. If you did not like Ragnarok, you're going to hate this movie. I guarantee you that. If you did like Ragnarok, you're more than likely gonna like this. But as somebody who sees Ragnarok as a top 5 best MCU movie, a movie that I do think revitalized the character of Thor for the best ways, and then improved him in Infinity War, which I still think Infinity War is the best Thor movie till this day. This movie took all of what made Thor special within those last 2 or 3 movies and just was like, oh, here's the special part. Because that's the thing that made Thor special. The special part that Taika was able to build was there was comedy there, but there's also heart, there was emotion. Yes, and instead in this Thor Love and Thunder, what they do is they take this and they start taking a lot of the layers. There's still some emotion and love left, but they throw out most of it, and then they just add more comedy, and now we're back to this weird bubble. And Thor is a moron in this movie. He was stupid for it. And the stupid Thor thing can get funny for a while, but in this movie, they just overdid it. And again, if you go watch all my videos of me saying that the Thor Love and Thunder trailer was going to be wonderful, I said that this was my most anticipated movie. A lot of people didn't like that. My most unpopular comment, or one of the most unpopular comments I've made in the last couple of months on YouTube, was Thor Love and Thunder has me more excited than Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness, and I can guarantee you right now I'm very wrong about that. That first trailer for Thor Love and Thunder was amazing, wonderful. And by the way, one of the things I said is I love the music choice. It felt like a rock and roll movie while they played Sweet Child O' Mine by Guns N' Roses. This movie, I think, at 4 occasions played Guns N' Roses. One of the characters even named themselves after one of the members of Guns N' Roses, and they kept playing Sweet Child O' Mine for at least 2 or 3 scenes. There's like 2 or 3 scenes in this movie that keep playing that damn song, and I love that song because you stop repeating the dang song. At one point, they do play Welcome to the Jungle, which I like that scene. I thought that scene was pretty cool and funny. But this movie, I felt like they saw how the Immigrant Song from Led Zeppelin was very impactful in that ending in Ragnarok, and they tried doing that again, but with Sweet Child O' Mine, it did not work. This time, it just felt like they just put it there because Taika Waititi is an obvious Guns N' Roses fan. I'm sorry. This movie is a disappointment, isn't it? It's immeasurably disappointing. I don't know, and I genuinely think the problem with what happened in this movie is that Taika Waititi got way over his head and thought, hey, people love this from Ragnarok, let's do that again, but intensify it. I genuinely think that's what happened. And a part of me also believes that because Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness was this serious, horror film, and then Wakanda Forever is going to delve in deep with the passing away of Chadwick Boseman, I genuinely felt like Kevin Feige saw this movie and thought, hey, people want a fun summer blockbuster. Let's give them Thor. Let's give them Ragnarok, but let's intensify the comedy from Ragnarok into this movie. And by the way, Gore is the best villain that the Thor movies have had. Better than Malekith, because Malekith is one of the worst villains ever. Better than Hela, even though Ragnarok I still think is the far better movie without any hesitation. Ragnarok is far better than Love and Thunder, but the one thing Love and Thunder does better is Gore. However, Gore was so underused in this movie that Christian Bale. So Christian Bale has said for years that he was never going to return with comic movies, and then when Thor Love and Thunder came out, he said it because there was a great script, that Gore's motivation story was interesting, and that got me far more excited because Christian Bale has rejected a lot of comic roles, and the fact that Gore is one of the most interesting characters in the Thor Marvel comics, this movie, I genuinely feel like they cut out 30 minutes of this movie. I'm not saying this movie should have been longer, but I felt like a lot of the scenes were replaced with goofy comedic moments. And Christian Bale read the first initial script and thought, hey, I want to do this. Gore is a very deep, dark character. It felt like they gave him that, but they took out a lot of scenes. Like, for example, again, you don't see him killing gods. Not one single god is killed. The closest he comes to killing a god is when he's about to stab Thor in a couple occasions. By the way, the whole fight scene in the Shadow Realm, that looked cool. I'll say that. That looked cool. That felt kind of like Sin City. Gave me Sin City vibes. It's not a very long fight, but it did give me Sin City vibes. And again, Jane Foster, cancer storyline. I will say I appreciate that they at least took the cancer storyline serious. But because this movie was so layered with so much comedy, it kind of made you not care that much about the cancer storyline. Not only that, but Jane Foster is not that interesting of a character. In this movie, she is massively improved. But this movie, again, because it wants to be way too funny, way too comedic, it almost undermines everything that is serious. Even the beginning of the movie, they show you Thor, having gone through the death of his parents, Loki, all this, the entire past, and they just treat that whole monologue as a joke. Like, what? This is a character with a lot of trauma now. Thor now, lives a life where he's just lost everyone, and I don't know. This movie just turned that into a joke. And Korg is hilarious in this movie. Don't get me wrong. But I also felt like Korg could have just not joined. Because you see Korg joins Valkyrie and Jane and helps them out. I honestly think that Korg probably shouldn't have done that. Because some of the jokes in it were not very good. I can also see some of the grifter accounts like Geeks and Gamers, Ryan Kinnell. I know they're going to complain about this movie because there is LGBTQ plus stuff. Now, you don't see it, but you do hear it. I was fine with that. There is a scene, and this isn't a spoiler. I'm going to try my best to be very vague as possible. There's a scene where somebody calls Jane Lady Thor, and she says, "I am not Lady Thor. I am Mighty Thor." And look, I don't care about the names. I'm fine with it. I like the storyline of Jane having cancer, then becoming a Thor version. I don't know. I just felt like that scene was a little too tagged on. It kind of felt like Taika was like, I don't want people to... By the way, I don't get why people care so much about whether or not she's called Lady Thor, Mighty Thor. At the end of the day, she's a derivative character who... And I liked her in this movie a lot, by the way. Natalie Portman's talented and she's great. And this is the best we've seen of Jane. But it kind of felt like that scene was just way too out of place. Not because it's woke, social justice propaganda. No, it's not because of that. It's because the scene just kind of felt random and out of nowhere. Like, what? First of all, your name isn't Thor. Your name's Jane. Your ex's name is Thor. Why would you call yourself that? Second, I don't know. I mean, can you blame someone for calling you Lady Thor? If you look like Thor and you're acting like Thor and you're a female version of him, I think it makes sense people would come up with the word lady rather than mighty. Like, that's all I gotta say, man. I don't know. This movie just didn't live up. Again, it's an entertaining movie. It has some good things, but I'm definitely not rewatching this movie, and I'm definitely not gonna buy the Blu-ray. I'll even say this. I know a lot of you guys are gonna ask me, Isaac, but you gave Morbius a good review, and you're giving Thor: Love and Thunder a negative review. Or I wouldn't say it's a negative. I would say it's a below average review. I'll say this: Morbius is a better movie than Thor: Love and Thunder. I'll straight up say that. I like Morbius. I didn't love Morbius, but I liked Morbius. But that movie to me was a better movie than this. Especially because that movie didn't have jokes every 3 seconds. And also, I'll say this one last thing. This didn't feel like a Thor movie. This felt like an episode of a Thor series. At least besides the ending. And also the ending of this movie, and I won't say what it is. Again, no spoilers. But in the ending of the movie, they do something which I think was nice and sweet. But at the same time, I was like, really? I don't know if I'm buying this, man. I don't know, man. But anyways, you guys let me know, what are your thoughts on Thor: Love and Thunder? Did you like it? Did you not? Whatever it is. Or have you seen it? Have you not? Whatever it is. Please let me know in the comments. I'm ultimately disappointed. That's all I really have to say. I don't hate this movie. In fact, I might maybe check it out a second time just to see. Maybe I gave it too much expectations. I don't know. But this movie, it took out a lot of what made Ragnarok special and decided, hey, let's be a Saturday Night Live sketch. Also, there's this cameo. This is confirmed by the Hollywood Reporter, but there's a cameo of Melissa McCarthy. There's like this scene, there's a play, and you see Matt Damon, and I believe it's Chris Hemsworth's brother. I don't know. And they're redoing the scene of when Hela first sees Thor and Loki. So in Thor Ragnarok, they do something similar where Matt Damon plays Loki. I thought in Thor Ragnarok, it's hilarious. It's funny because it's kind of short and simple. It's quick. And it also shows you the reason why it's there is because Loki took over Odin. Odin's place in Asgard, and it was kind of showing you that this is what he's doing. In this movie, they just added kind of randomly. They redo the scene where Hela sees Thor and Loki, and of course you see Matt Damon back, and they brought in Melissa McCarthy. I'm assuming you guys know where I'm going with this. In that scene, there was almost no purpose. And in Thor Ragnarok, there was a purpose for it to show you what Loki is doing as the replacement of Odin. But in this movie, it was just kind of like, hey, everyone found that funny. Let's do it again. And Melissa McCarthy isn't funny. So it was just kind of like a cringe scene. There's a lot of scenes in this movie that are very cringe. The comedy in this movie is just... I genuinely think that if Taika Waititi is going to do a fifth Thor movie, he's definitely going to have to learn from his mistakes. And I think you can already see that with the Rotten Tomato scores. There's much lower scores for this movie than there were for Ragnarok. I'm assuming a lot of fans are going to think something similar. Even I think most people are going to agree with me when I say this. I don't think this movie touches the level that Ragnarok was at. But anyway, that's just my opinion. That's just my perspective. Again, I don't hate this movie. I know a lot of people are going to watch this video and say, oh, Isaac hates Love and Thunder. No, I don't hate it. I like it. but it's below average. It's mediocre. To me, if somebody ever wants to use an example of Marvel's biggest weakness, I'll say this movie is that. This movie is the definition of Marvel's biggest weakness, and their biggest weakness is they're too scared to go into dark thematic moments in movies, and so they have to constantly keep throwing jokes at you. One of the examples was Shang-Chi, when they're showing you Shang-Chi's backstory, how he's kind of been treated poorly from his father, and then it comes with this like little meat joke in the airplane, and it's just, I don't know, it's a little cringe. Although I do love Shang-Chi. In this movie, it has that, but intensified. A lot of jokes in this movie were not good. Yeah, that's my full review on it. I might do a spoiler review later this week in a spoiler live stream, so be on the lookout for that. Ultimately, again, this movie definitely could have been improved. But yeah, I'll see you guys next time. Peace.
Yes! Hell yeah! Hey, come on, baby! Come on! Yes! Come on!